Hello, everybody, and welcome. I am thrilled to have you all joining us for today's Student Experience panel, Women and Higher Education. Thank you for joining us from all over the world. My name is Christy Nino, and I work here in the Central Graduate Admissions Office at NYU. So just to situate us a little bit here, on March 8th, 1908, women workers in needle trades marched through New York City's Lower East Side, right down the street from our university, to protest child labor laws, sweatshop working conditions, and to demand women's suffrage. Many years later, in 1987, March was declared Women's History Month in honor of this event. So we're excited to close out the month with this very special student panel. At NYU, women identified students make up almost 60% of the total student body population. It is my pleasure to welcome some of them here today from across our campus community to share their experiences during their time as students. As a woman, I find such value in hearing from the experiences of others, and I'm really excited to hear from this group of dynamic women who will answer questions about mentorship, gender dynamics at university, support resources across campus, and many more. Before I turn it over to our moderator, there are a few things I'd like to point out. First, this event is being recorded and participants will receive the recording after today's session. Second, closed captioning is available and you can turn those on and off via your Zoom controls. And third, I will turn off the chat in just a moment and encourage you to use the question and answer box during today's session. And we'll do our best to either get those to our panelists or answer them for you. And lastly, we recognize the land on which our university occupies. New York University acknowledges that it is located in ancestral Lenape homelands, and it recognizes the long-standing significance of these lands for Lenape nations, both past and present. We are conscious that New York City has the largest urban Native population in the United States. We believe that historical awareness of Indigenous inclusion and erasure is critically important, and we're committed to working to overcome these effects in our own educational institution. And with that, I would like to welcome our moderator, Lena, to join us. Lena is currently pursuing her MA in journalism at NYU. She completed her undergraduate studies at Smith College, a historical women's college, where she developed a deep appreciation for women's empowerment. Lena is passionate about helping women achieve their career goals, and she's the host and produces the podcast Girl, You're Hired. So I think she is very capable of moderating today's panel, and I'm super excited to have her. A big thank you to her and to all of our panelists for your participation today. And with that, Lena, you can take it away.
Thank you, Christy. I really appreciate that introduction. So now we're going to open up and begin our panel. At first, we're going to have a couple pre-selected questions for our panelists, and later on, we'll open up to the audience. So let's start by having our panelists briefly introduce themselves. And first up, Rachel, do you want to give us a brief introduction?
Of course. Hi, I hope everyone can hear me. My name is Rachel Lloyd. I am a second-year graduate student at the Steinhardt School. I'm receiving my Master's of Music and Vocal Performance. I'm originally from Toronto, Canada, and I'm really excited to be here today to talk with you all.
Thank you. Welcome, Rachel. Next up, Meher, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Lena. Hi, everyone. Hey, everyone. My name is Meher. I'm also a second-year graduate student at NYU. I am pursuing a master's in news and documentary film at the Arthur L. Carter Journalism Institute. And women of color and women at NYU have been very instrumental mentors throughout my academic journey. And so I'm excited to be on the panel today and talk more.
Thank you so much. Next up, Arpita, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. So, hi everyone, my name is Arpita and I'm also a second year master's student at NYU Tandon. I'm majoring in computer engineering. And women here, whoever I came across, they were very supportive, and my journey so far has been really nice and charming.
Thank you. Julianne, would you like to go next?
Sure. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Julianne Salazar. I am a doctoral candidate at Steinhardt in the EDD and Leadership and Innovation program. I'm researching community college transfer and cross-institutional partnerships. I'm from Brooklyn, New York, and I currently work at LaGuardia Community College, where I direct an equal opportunity program. Super excited to be here today and to talk more with everyone.
Excited to have you. Last but not least, Lorraine.
Thank you, Lena, and thank you everyone for hosting this wonderful panel. I'm joining from the traditional Treaty 6 territory, Amiskwitchi in Canada. I am an Indigenous educator and consultant. I own 3 Space Consulting, and my interests are around educational leadership, advocacy, and equity denied groups in terms of getting equal opportunity to participate and achieve within the education world. I'm a mom of 3 boys. Henry is 7, Brayden is 4, and Milo is 2. They are wild, and so they are off at daycare, day home today, so that I can participate with a clear mind. And I recently completed, just the other month actually, my Master of Arts in Education, Leadership, Policy, and Advocacy.
Congratulations on that, and thank you for the introduction. We are so excited to have you here. Well, perfect. Now that we have introduced all of our panelists, let's start with our first question. So I'm going to direct some of these questions specifically at some of our panelists. So the first question is for you, Rachel. What motivated you to pursue a graduate degree? And can you tell us a little bit more about how you see that impacting your future career aspirations and maybe some other advice that you have for women maybe wanting to pursue a similar path?
Yeah, for sure. So I was interested in pursuing a graduate degree because I wanted to fine tune my skills after my undergraduate degree. I thought after my undergraduate degree, I went out and did some work I was working corporately and out in the world, and I really wanted to fine tune my skills and get a little bit more detail oriented. So that's one of the things that drove me to pursue a graduate degree. I think it's been so helpful, even having not been out into the professional world in New York City just yet, but I already feel the impact that it's had on me as a speaker, as a performer, as someone who's interested in working in the arts and working with other women of color in the arts. So my advice essentially to any particular woman of color who is interested in working in the arts is that there is space for us and that we have to continue to make our own space in this industry. And, you know, getting a graduate degree is a great way to like really connect and really network with performers and teachers and producers and directors and songwriters who you might want to work with one day. So it's a great opportunity and I would highly recommend it.
Thank you so much for that insightful answer. So next, I'd like to ask Arpita, do you want to tell us the same thing? Tell us what specifically motivated you to pursue your graduate degree.
Yeah, sure. So like I come from a background where my mother has like did her graduate studies and she has been a teacher for many years. And later on in her life, she got involved in politics, and currently she's pursuing her law degree. So I think that my motivation to pursue my graduate education comes from my mother, whom I've seen pursuing her degrees throughout her life, no matter what the age and no matter what point. And moreover, while I was pursuing graduate degree, I felt like it opens a lot of opportunities, and I can get the exposure that is required. And I get to meet different people from like different backgrounds, different diversities, people of different diversities. And this journey, the graduate school at Tandon School of Engineering, it has been really helpful. The projects and the professors, we have came really a long way. And like, yeah, I'm about to graduate in the spring. So I would give out a message to all the women who want to step their like foot in tech, that it is not an easy journey, but once you come inside and you set your foot and make connections and talk to your peers, it becomes easy and you can pull your way throughout. So, yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that. That's such a great point. And I love that you tied in your mother as someone who inspired you. So that was really, really neat. And I relate to that as well. My mom has always been a leader and advocating for me to go back to school. So perfect. Building on that, next, I would like to ask a question to you, Lorraine. Were there any challenges that you expected to face in graduate school? due to your identity? And did those end up being a reality for you? And if so, how did you face them?
Thanks for that really interesting question, Lena. So when I think about answering this, I've kind of separated my answer into two really meaningful, significant parts of who I am. And the first is, and I'm not sure exactly if this is a secret, deeply held optimism that I have that I don't even know about, but I often walk into spaces expecting to be treated with respect and professionalism as an Indigenous woman. And I also expect that there's not going to be any explicit bias or prejudice based on those two identity pieces. And my experience at NYU really held true to that. I don't feel as though I was treated from a deficit perspective because of those pieces. And rather, I was really affirmed in my experiences in my classes and my relationships with my professors. Now, as a parent, it was a really different experience. So I was unsure, as like many people, what the timeline for COVID was going to look like and how it was going to unfold. And as a family, we were committed to moving to New York City for this program. And as COVID progressed and as things developed, it became really clear that moving our family from our home to New York City within a global pandemic held some really difficult ethical and moral challenges to our roles as parents. And in the absence of really any meaningful and targeted support for parents as students from the administrative or institutional side of the school, we had to make a decision how we were going to respond to the policies being enacted that really made our children and their health and well-being collateral damage. And so that was the biggest challenge as a student parent starting graduate school, was whether or not we were logistically able to make New York City our home. And in the end, we were unable to do that in a way that did not jeopardize our children and their health and well-being and educational attainment. And so I think that if institutions are really serious about wanting diverse students and a myriad of women identifying intersectional students and staff, then they have to be really serious about the supports and accommodations they offer to these groups and provide differentiated supports and services and accommodations that allow women like me, who have 3 very busy boys school age, to be able to come to New York City, contribute to the school in meaningful and important ways, and also be able to advance my own career later in life. And that is a big absence. And that was a constant struggle during my time as a student at NYU. And so I had to accommodate policy. It was not a school accommodating me, it was us having to accommodate.
Thank you, Lorraine. You've given a lot of thought to that, and we appreciate how you shared it through the lens of being a mother and how much more goes into these decisions of moving to a new city. And I'd like to hear from another panelist on this topic. So Arpita, would you also like to share some of the challenges that you maybe expected to face and how those possibly played out or didn't and how you faced them?
Yeah, sure. So moving to New York City from India, like it is a completely different country. There were challenges. The challenges I would talk about were basically the accommodation, as earlier Lauren mentioned. Like as a student, when we come here, we search for houses and accommodation, and we need the good roommates and everything so that everything to fall in order. So that was one challenge that I faced. Otherwise, I feel that since I started my classes, since I joined in fall 21, I have been working at the grad admissions office. So people there were accommodating, people there were helpful. If I faced any difficulty or any other things or any specific thing that I was unable to understand or figure out, people were there to tell me, and it made the thing easy. Otherwise, yeah, the main thing that I experienced was was the accommodation, as you mentioned. Other than that, related in regards to studies and with the subjects, there were professors, there were TAs to discuss, and they were there at every step of the journey where I was unable to figure out, or where I was confused or I felt doubted. And and I can also see that there are various societies at NYU, like Women in Engineering. So they send out regular emails to us telling about there might be small participations, or there might be some activities. So you can just meet group of people and network and get to know about like how others feel about the same situation, because there are many people coming from different parts of the world to attend graduate school at NYU. So I felt that there were circumstances, there were challenges, but at the same time, with the help of the peers and the mentors, I was able to get to them.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your perspective, and I'm glad you were able to work through those challenges. So next up, I'd like to hear from our panelist, Meher. I was wondering if you could share with us if there were any unforeseen challenges that you faced due to your gender identity.
Thanks, Lena. That's a great question. I think my biggest challenge was even deciding to go into filmmaking and documentary filmmaking at all. I grew up as an immigrant kid, and I often thought that, that filmmaking and journalism are for other people, not maybe an option that was open for me. And so I studied development economics and the social sciences in college. And then I took like baby steps towards media in my professional experience, even just personally building myself up to pursue the field. And it's because of the challenge that you're not represented. And I didn't grow up seeing South Asian Americans in media growing up. And now, of course, there's so many, but growing up, I just never thought it was an option. And now in my program, I was the only South Asian American that was pursuing my degree at the moment. And I had a very supportive cohort and very supportive faculty. But, throughout my career and my graduate degree, I have had to sometimes convince people that the stories I want to tell are important when I'm centering, and most of my stories center women and women of color in my narratives. I've done a story on the first Asian American bookstore owner in Manhattan. You should, if anyone's in town, they should definitely visit her bookstore. It's in Chinatown. And Kathak dancers who are trying to talk about their ancestral trauma through dance. And sometimes it was interesting that I had to, for me, these were fascinating stories, but I did have to convince people. And I wonder why that was. Sometimes I think it's an intersectional challenge of it represented also. I'm a woman and I'm an Indian woman, and how to communicate what matters to me and what I want to do in my professional and academic career. I think it's also, I needed mentorship for that. And I think anything I can share is that it's so important in graduate school to find your community and find people who face the same challenges as you in any capacity. And I know that I'm a member of the South Asian Journalists Association. I'm a member of Brown Girls Doc Mafia, a community of documentary filmmakers here in New York. And I think I'd really encourage everyone who's in graduate school, who's thinking of graduate school, to find those communities for yourself, because those are people who understand you and understand your experiences. And they've probably faced the same things that you're facing right now, and they can help guide you to whatever you want to do next.
Thank you, Meher. And it's really interesting that you said, am I also, as a female, can I see myself as being a filmmaker? If you look at Hollywood, such a male-dominated industry. And I just wanted to point out, it's very inspiring that you're joining these networks and not being afraid to report and document the stories you're passionate about and bringing more awareness to. And I had the pleasure of watching your final documentary, and I just have to tell the people in the audience, I highly recommend seeing it. It was very, very inspiring. So thank you for that. I'm gonna now hand it over to Julianne, and I want to know if you also want to share with us maybe some unforeseen challenges that you faced due to your identity.
Sure, thank you. So I have been very fortunate in my experience at NYU. I'm in a doctoral program that's led by founders who have a real commitment to making sure that the students they're serving feel seen. And I have a really wonderful cohort that has just a range of perspective and a range of experiences that has really helped me persist through this program and kind of reaching the finish line. And I think for me, the biggest challenge as a woman being a doctoral student has been being a mother, right? So Lorraine was talking earlier about her experience kind of juggling multiple priorities and trying to kind of position herself in a way where she can kind of meet these different goals and different priorities for her family and for her own professional trajectory. And I really related to that. I have 2 children, and I gave birth to my son in the middle of my doctoral program. And everyone thought I was crazy, for doing this. And I was really nervous to tell the founder of the program that I was going to have a baby. And I had this meeting, and she said, okay, so we're going to support you, and we'll be flexible, and you're going to finish your degree. Right? Like it was very clear that I wasn't going to be treated any differently, and I would receive the support that I needed to balance what it meant to have a baby in the middle of the program and still continue to make progress towards my degree. And I received support. I received flexibility. 2 other women in my cohort also had babies in the middle of the program. And so then we had a community, of just kind of having these little babies while trying to do research and write our dissertation. So that, I think it wasn't the experience that I expected, but it was the one that I got. And I'm very grateful for it. And I think it really speaks to how important it is in terms of the folks who are leading these kinds of programs and are designing these programs, who they are and the lens that they bring, because it really does impact the students' experiences.
Yes, your insights are very, very valuable there. And I think it leads back to the question of, do we as women need to time our graduate degrees around when we want to start a family? And you've proven that we should not let something like that stop us, and that with the right faculty, like your supportive, professors that you mentioned, were like, we'll support you, which I think leads me into that next question, which is around mentorship and support networks. And I'd love to hear from you further actually on this topic, Julianne, if you can share what those mentorship and support groups look like in advancing women in higher education. If you want to just build on that a little bit further and how you've maybe built some of those support networks that you mentioned.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the support networks are so critical, right? Being able to connect with other individuals who have similar experiences, who have encountered similar obstacles or challenges, right? Seeing your reflection in the leadership, right, of a program is so critical to your own ability to kind of position yourself and develop a foresight for what could be, right? So kind of having the mentors to kind of give you the perspective of what it could be and seeing yourself reflected in them, but then also having that community around you to kind of push you along, right? And kind of sharing those experiences. I've had conversations with my fellow, moms where we're like, oh, this is really hard. And I don't know, I just feel like I'm just being lazy. It's like, are we being lazy, or are we exhausted, right? Are we tired because we're working and we're doctoral students and we're parents and we're living through a global pandemic? So being tired is not being lazy. And so having someone to kind of challenge some of those self-perceptions that you may be carrying, right? Those kind of things that you might be internalizing from the outside world, to kind of hold up a mirror and be like, no, you're tired because you were up all night with a newborn. And that's okay, and then having mentorship to kind of echo that. So whenever I meet with my advisor, when we check in, she's like, how are your kids? How are you, right? Before we jump into the research and the timelines and the deadlines, there's this kind of pause to acknowledge our shared humanity and our shared, our community, which I think is really so important, because, so often the graduate experience can be very isolating, right? You can feel very alone and unseen. So I think those mentorships and those communities are super critical.
I love that. Thank you so much. And that phrase you use about holding up a mirror, that's exactly why having other supportive women in your network and in your circles, when they hold up that mirror, it'll be through a lens of connection and almost like a sisterhood. So thank you for bringing that up so beautifully. So let's hear from another panelist on the same matter. Lorraine, would you like to tell us a little bit more about your thoughts on mentorship and the support networks of women and how they advance women in higher education?
Yes, thank you for the question. And much of my feedback and experience aligns really closely with what Julianne shared, in that when it comes to the mentorship networks that are in existence at NYU, I cannot overstate this enough, that my professors were incredible. They were my biggest supporters. They were staunchly in my corner, encouraging me, pushing me, providing enriching learning experiences. And they held really high expectations for the quality of work that I was submitting and handing in. And at the same time, they also understood that I had lots of balls in the air. I had responsibilities that were unique to being a student parent within a global pandemic, that sometimes I wasn't able to commute to campus for a week because my kids, every single one of them, were sick, and sometimes for long times. And so they were flexible and accommodating for those realities without ever considering dropping the bar of expectations for the quality of work that they expected me to hand in and produce. And these are also individuals that, I sent, when I started my consulting firm, I sent them my website first, and they were the people who wrote back and told me they were so proud to see the translation from some of the learning and conversations and dialogue we had in class into a corporate or organizational culture and practice. And they're also the people who sent me, children's books. They said, I thought of your boys, and here's a book. I would get these packages in the mail. And so I can't understate enough or overstate enough that these professors, the faculty that NYU has recruited, are excellent. They are wonderful humans. They are smart and experienced professors and educators. And my experience with the mentorship provided by them was top-notch. I would say my criticism, again, comes more from an institutional or administrative side, where supports for me as a student parent are non-existent. I'm going to be very frank about that. In comparison to some of the big universities in Canada, where they have family housing, they have an Indigenous student center that works to provide targeted, responsive supports and programs for Indigenous students who push narratives of decolonization, who lead change and challenge to institutional norms and culture and assumptions. Those pieces are missing. And I found that difficult to have this absence of traditional knowledge and elders and knowledge keepers, not part of NYU, not part of student support networks. And I think it was really interesting to just see this big divide between the personal contributions professors made for me personally, and my experience at NYU was so transforming and transformative. And from the administrative side, there was this huge hole of thoughtful, targeted support.
I'm so happy to hear that. Thank you for sharing. So the next question that I'd like to bring up to our panelists is a little bit more on the institution level. So women identified students at NYU outnumber male students at every level. And I was wondering if that has a noticeable effect on the environment on campus. So Meher, do you like to answer that for us?
Sure. Thank you for the question, Lena. If I can share, I can start by sharing an experience. I'm in a 10-person master's program, very small, and 9 out of 10 of us are identify as women. And there was exercise at the beginning of a class we took last semester called visual thinking. And the professor, a very lovely professor, Professor Shimon Dotan, asked us to share and tell a story. And that was the whole exercise. It was just tell a story about your life. And then we all went around and were tell a story for kind of up to 5 to 10 minutes. What ended up happening was that we kind of shared the most deepest, darkest stories of our life at 8 p.m. class to each other on a Thursday night. And I think it was reflective of how safe we had all felt with each other going through the whole graduate program experience. And we'd only known each other, I think, up to 6 months till then. But I think it made such a huge difference that for my cohort, that we were mostly a group of just very passionate, supportive women who wanted to succeed in our field and help each other do so as well. And I think having that comfort and safety to be in a process of learning, because especially in the creative field, I know that I didn't come from the background of filmmaking beforehand. I'd worked in nonprofits, and to feel safe in that environment, I walked into class every day. My first year, still this year also, like afraid. I was like, I am not good enough to be here. I have not done this enough. I'm so new to this. People have directed commercials for Mercedes-Benz and I've already made a feature film or in this program. And I'm like, what am I doing here? And to be in a program of women who are not just talented, but also just kind and lovely people and kind of looking out for each other, made such a huge difference to my grad school experience. And I know that they're friends for life. And I think that kind of support from my peers has been invaluable. And then the faculty, I think Lorraine spoke really wonderfully about how there's some incredible faculty at NYU, and majority of my professors have been women. Majority of my supervisors have been women. And I think that does reflect the kind of understanding and support that you can receive. And then in the end, it's just not to sugarcoat, though, however, how challenging being a grad student is. I know that for me personally, I was balancing school and working on my film and working part-time and doing an internship and commuting from New Jersey, sometimes up to 3 or 4 hours a day based on the train delay. And I can't even imagine being a parent on top of that. So big kudos to Lorraine and Juliana. Don't know. I'm like, I feel exhausted and tired all the time. So I am trying to manage my schedule. And so I think it's challenging. And I think sometimes people won't always be understanding. Like sometimes I've had to miss a deadline and I feel like I've had to just be upfront about it. And sometimes I've had a professor who was not as understanding about my experiences, where I come from. I know fellow grad students who didn't have to work during their grad program, and which is just something that I knew that this was my experience, and to own up to it and really be honest with myself as like, you have this is how you can make this experience work for yourself. And you do come from a not completely traditional or represented background for your field, and that's okay. You're going to do it the best you can in the way you can, and you're here, so make the best of it. Yeah.
Your answers raise a really interesting point, especially I was hearing maybe some things around imposter syndrome, but then the women were just so welcoming and teaching one another. So that helps us overcome that. And statistically speaking, they say women sometimes struggle more with imposter syndrome. So I'm just happy to hear that NYU has, not made that, projected that more. And I can relate to that personally. I'm in an MBA class as an elective, and it is more women in the class, which is wonderful. And we just got into pairs and groups, and I'm not a full-time MBA student. I'm a journalism student, but they took me into a group and they never made me feel like I'm an imposter because I'm not part of Stern. So I'm just really glad that we have similar experiences across NYU. So now I'd like to hear from another panelist on this. Lorraine, do you want to add a little bit more about how women identify students outnumber male students, and maybe how you've seen that impact the environment on campus?
Sure. Thank you for the question. So from my experience professionally, and then also as a student at NYU, one of the things that I find really interesting in terms of the culture that we're in now is that as the profile and opportunities for women increase, we still exist within the realities of white supremacy, patriarchy, colonialism. And so what I see often in classes is this tension between women taking space, being visible, and being successful, and some of the more nuanced ways that this white supremacist patriarchy is really implicit in our lived realities. And so one of the ways that I see this happen in classes is that when men are in the minority, still, I think the common narrative that ends up happening is that their profile becomes elevated and they become deferred to as a minority. And in my professional experience, what this ends up leading to is that men are promoted faster and go to higher positions faster than women do. And within the learning environment, what this often translates into is specific calling on male identified students to contribute to class discussions. They're more able to challenge assumptions and ideas freely without having to be strategic or thoughtful about how they do that. They just do it. And what I'm starting to see more of, and I think as a mature student, as a mother, and also somebody who had over a decade of work experience in these types of situations where, you think about before you fall asleep and you're like, I should have said something there. And then later in your career, you're able to say those things and you reflect upon what the outcomes of those are, that I had the skill set with me. And so I brought that into the classroom and I was able to live out this, challenging this narrative, challenging the assumptions that come along in an implicit way with the white supremacy patriarchy that we exist within. And one of the things that I really loved seeing is that once we kind of, as a collective of women identifying students in these classes, once we started to do this, more and more women participated, and then largely we're the ones contributing to conversations and contributing to our thoughts to the coursework and the assigned readings and the activities. And it was interesting to see this progression and evolution just within each individual kind of class, that this is ended up often being, the narrative or the common experience is that we were, with leadership and with an example and with a collective community supportive of ideas and our fellow women identifying students, we were able to start to change some of these assumptions and expectations of who gets to participate, whose ideas count. And that was really fun to see young women and mature women and women from lots of different intersectional backgrounds and positionalities start to take that space and redefine the narratives and assumptions, even in this really small, isolated community, but that we were rewriting those pieces.
Yeah, very, very true. Thank you for sharing that. So speaking of gender ratios, so despite that there are so many women that outnumber the male students, when it comes to faculty, though, there are more male professors and female professors. So I was wondering, Julianne, do you want to share with us, why do you think that might be, and does it affect university culture?
Sure, yeah. So, a lot of it is really connected to what Lorraine has been sharing, right? And that women, particularly women of color, are judged and perceived differently, right? Because the dominant lens is the white male lens. And so there's lots of research that shows that through faculty, kind of tenure track lines, as well as through higher education leadership, right? So kind of the administrative roles, women, and again, particularly women of color, tend to be stopped like mid-level. And so the disparities kind of grow larger and larger. The salary disparities grow larger and larger as well as the positions, kind of become increasingly more, have a larger scope, have larger impact, right? And really what it comes down to is implicit bias, racism, and sexism. Women are generally held to different standards. Different responsibilities tend to be kind of given to them, usually around kind of like community building or making people feel comfortable. And then who defines what comfort is, right? And who gets to kind of make those decisions. I know someone who was in a observation and teaching evaluation, was noted that she wasn't warm enough in her teaching, right? So like, what does that even mean? And how does that even apply to the task at hand, right? Which is to deliver a lecture. And so there's just different standards that are applied that are then leveraged against women in terms of opportunities for promotion, opportunities for visibility. If you're a parent or any caretaker, right, there's going to be limitations in how quickly you can, right, respond to things, how quickly you can be available to things, particularly if you're thinking about like the evenings or the weekends. There's real limitations around that. And so like, for example, for me, my son was very sick. He had pneumonia, he had a lung infection. I was not granted time off to take care of him, and I was just kind of expected to manage both. And so that meant I had to scale back, right? I had to scale back my visibility. I had to scale back how vocal I was, or different initiatives and things like that. And so there's this kind of forced scaling back that I think can happen for women, that then translates, right, to not being looked to for different promotions and different opportunities for growth. And you can see that in the data in terms of how women and women of color are progressing, both on the faculty line, but also in administration.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. It's very important points to bring up. So Rachel, we haven't heard from you in a little bit. I wanted to ask you, have you seen women have any challenges in your program or field or industry due to their gender?
Yeah, I think this is like a twofold question, because I've seen it at the university level, and I think generally we see this in like a larger sense when we think about like the performing arts, specifically in New York. On a program level, I have watched students receive, other female students or women identifying students receive those kind of challenges and face those challenges because they are women. But I've also watched heads of certain sections of my departments face challenges from male identifying students that they don't receive from female identifying students. In particular, I watched a male colleague of mine give the head of our department kind of a lot of grief over some really valid commentary she was giving him about his thesis preparation, and watching that advice was not taken, that her critiques were not seen as valid until a male identifying professor gave him that critique. Then it was taken. And it was taken much more positively when he said it in a way where I think she said it in kind of a similar manner as well. But it's very interesting to watch my male identifying colleagues behave in certain ways towards even the female identifying faculty, that they also behave this way towards some of the female identifying students. So it's interesting to notice that despite these faculty members being faculty members, the treatment of them still stays the same as it does for their female colleagues, which I found fairly interesting. On like a wider scale in terms of performance in New York City, it's easy for us to say like we have like your Viola Davises and your Kerry Washingtons in terms of like wonderful, specifically Black women performing and working in theater, but those opportunities are really few and far between. And we also see those women, despite their success, face a number of setbacks in branching out to do other things and to create more opportunities for women of color. Specifically, the vitriol that Viola Davis received regarding Woman King that came out, that wonderful film, and how a lot of Academy members were like, well, we already gave you this, we can't also give you this. But for a male counterpart, specifically a white male counterpart, it's okay for them to have an acting career and also be a producer, also be a director. It's interesting to see that we can push the boundaries so far as women, and specifically women of color, and then also be told at the same time no. So I've seen both happening, and it's really fascinating what we've decided women can do and what we've decided that they cannot do in both an academic setting and also a professional setting.
Yeah, you raised some really critical and complex issues. So thanks for bringing those to light. Next, let's hear from another panelist and get their insights. Arpita, would you like to tell us your thoughts on this?
Yeah, sure. So my thoughts are like being a woman in tech, and I just graduated and came after my undergrad directly to my grad school. So I think that creates a challenge for me, because most of the people I meet here, either maybe female identifying students or male identifying students, they have some work experience or they have some professional life that they have experienced before. I think that makes me feel a little bit, makes me feel it, gives me like off the edge. Like there are some challenges that I can face, that in whenever we can see that the tech is evolving very fast, and we need to know almost like too many languages are there. Like recently we can see that ChatGPT is being in highlight. So similarly, the tech environment is facing it in a very fast manner, and we need to keep ourselves updated at every point of time. So the subjects that we are taking, sometimes the coursework that is there in our curriculum, it might get outdated, but for some reasons we have to complete it because it is a part of our curriculum and we need to do it properly. But I think that we need some incorporation of the latest technologies, of the latest things that are happening in the industry. And yeah, I feel that being a women identified student in the engineering field, I know that there are a lot of Asian people working in the tech industry, South Asian and people from different parts of Asia. So I think that that makes it a little bit easy, but at the same time, it gets, like Meher mentioned, like the imposter syndrome, about like sometimes it feels like it can be a little bit overwhelming. We can feel that people out there are more experienced, they know things better than us. Maybe they have worked for 5 years or 10 years or 4 years. There maybe some people are doing researches. Same as goes with the male part, because there are people who are male identifying students. They have their community, they have their groups, and sometimes it becomes difficult to get in that community when we want to, and when we want to learn something from them. So as sometimes we feel that it can be a little bit overwhelming, and it can be a little bit difficult to get to that level, because somehow we are female identifying students. No matter how good they do, no matter how great they are at their skills, they are still seen as someone like maybe not capable of doing that much hard work, or maybe not able to do works till a certain extent, that the bar that has been raised. And like, in my experience, women have crossed that bar higher than men, but still it is what it is. Like we are still seen somehow where female identifying students are not that capable of a male identifying student. So I feel that women out there are trying their best to do what they can to get out there and up level, upskill. So in all the situation, we are just trying to upskill ourselves more than we are required to. We just have to, I don't know, justify that ourselves, that okay, we are good at this and we can do better than most of the people that are there. We need to put extra efforts just because we're women in tech and females who are just trying to make their way through the tech industry.
Absolutely. Thanks for your meaningful contribution. So thank you. At this time, I would like to transition to some Q&A from the audience. So in your Zoom controls, you are welcome to add some questions that you have. And as we gather those up, that we could answer live in a few moments. I'll also do a last round for each panelist to answer briefly this question. What would you tell other women interested in attending NYU? Maybe something specific that wouldn't be as relevant to a male student. So Rachel, would you like to go first on that question? And in the meantime, my lovely panelist coworkers here and Zoom can help gather some questions.
Yeah, the advice that I would give, I guess, female identifying students interested in NYU is it's all about, we keep saying this, but like finding your community really matters. Within my program, specifically the women of color have kind of created our own special like group chat and a way for us to communicate and work with each other. And that has been really helpful in challenging some of the norms within the program, but also like fostering a sense of community, because most of us are not originally from this city. So that's something I would really encourage you to do, is make sure that you find a community and build that community, and know that that everyone is facing imposter syndrome. And the more you connect with other people, specifically other women, it makes that easier. It makes that transition easier for you.
Thank you. Next, Meher.
Yeah, certainly. I think my main advice would be to prioritize your mental health as a graduate student. Of course, this applies to everyone, to all genders, but I think particularly for women identifying students, of the various challenges that you can face throughout your degree, throughout your life in general. I think it's very important to check in on yourself and make sure that you're paying attention to yourself throughout this. I came to NYU to follow my dreams, and I think everyone here on this panel is so dedicated to the field that they're in. We all have big goals. We want to do a lot of things, but I think it's always, health is so important, and trying to take out your time to pay attention to that and really be present with yourself as you're doing all these things is critical. You do get 10 free mental health sessions as an NYU student, I think is important to mention. And there's great health services available on campus. And so I'd really encourage, if someone's exploring attending NYU, to check those out and look at that.
Thank you. I'm so glad you brought up mental health, and NYU has great insurance for that. I'm seeing someone in the city for very low copay. So it's definitely possible for long-term therapists too, for anyone, just to know that. And Arpita, do you want to give us your final answer about any last advice for women looking to come to NYU maybe?
Yeah, so for any women who want to come to NYU, I think it's a great thing. You can just to be sure to find your community, just make sure that you are part of various societies that NYU has, because like that you can find your community and feel at home away from home, because that's a very big thing, leaving everything behind and coming to a whole different new place and trying to fit in and trying to adjust to the things that are not and the way the things here happen a little bit differently than it used to happen back in India or back in wherever we studied earlier. So I think that when you find community, when you get involved in the events that happen on campus, it gives you a sense of like power, like you're fitting in and you can just know whatever is going on and how people are coping up and how people are helping each other out in the similar problems that we face. As all of the panelists have almost covered most of the points that were to be acknowledged about women feeling the imposter syndrome, and the second thing that Meher told about the mental health, that can, because a lot of things can become overwhelming because we try to get the best out all of us, and people here are coming to pursue their dreams. So obviously when you have a dream and you're committed to that, it can get overwhelming. So anyone who's seeking to come out to NYU, I would just advise them to be calm and just try to focus on what they came for and find the community so that they can help them in whatever challenges they face.
Beautifully said. Thank you. Julianne, what about you?
So I think, I would say I echo everything that's already been shared. I think it's really important to remind yourself every day that you belong here. I know the institution has made some gains in diversifying the campus and bringing in different perspectives. But it can feel isolating, right? If you're looking around and you're not seeing people that look like you or represent your lived experiences. And I know with my program on our first kind of like gathering, that was how they led the conversation. They reminded us, you were chosen to be here, you belong here, you are part of this community. And you have to remind yourself of that when the imposter syndrome kind of peaks in, because it will, because of the systems that we're learning and working and existing in. But just remind yourself every day that you belong here, you can do the work. There is community here for you, and you may have to look for it, right? It may not present as easily, but it's there, and it's very, very important. So definitely, if you can, invest the time in looking for the community that will help kind of support you along the way.
Yes, I love that. Thank you. And last but not least, Lorraine.
Thank you. And again, I agree with and appreciate all of the experiences and perspectives brought by the other panelists to this question. This past summer, I had the real privilege to go to South Africa and as a part of NYU and intern at UNESCO. And the professor that organized this trip and hosted us, Professor Teboho Moja, is South African and was instrumental in bringing down apartheid. And one of her stories she shared with me and that I could share again was that without her PhD qualification, without her dogged pursuit of higher education, that her return to South Africa to take down apartheid would not have been as successful as it was without those qualifications, without that education, without those letters beside her name. And I think one of the realities that we live within today is that when we think about wanting to make change in the world and have an impact and use our gifts and our knowledge to better the spaces that we exist within, that having those qualifications is still essential. And from my own personal experience as a, intergenerational survivor of residential school or Indian boarding schools, that education at all costs, it opens doors, it opens windows. It's an investment in yourself. It's an opportunity to see your talents refined and grow and enriched. And it also provides you with more tools and strategies and connections and a community and relationships where you can go out into the world and be supported and lean into your community to make that change and impact. So as an educator, as somebody who really believes in the power of education and qualifications, I really encourage everyone to seriously consider and pursue their higher education goals at NYU because of the community and the faculty that's there to support you. You just need to be prepared that the institution isn't as moving as fast as people are.
Thank you for wrapping up our panel with such a meaningful last note. So thank you, Lorraine. And that's all the time we have for our panel today. I want to just thank you all amazing women for volunteering your time and sharing such important stories. So thank you to all of you. And thanks also to some of you that helped organize this, Christy, Owen, April, all of you guys helped bring this to life. I want to also announce that we are having our Creating Connections event in April, which is for admitted students of color. So you should be hearing about that more soon, and we would love your attendance. So yeah, if you have any other questions, you can email our office, send us a chat, or call us and have a consultation with us, all above. So thank you. At this time, you're welcome to leave the panel, and I appreciate you guys being here with us. So thanks to the audience. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you, everyone. It was a pleasure.